I'd like to answer that question. But today, I'm going to have to assert my Sixth Amendment rights.
Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today we are covering the second episode in the Netflix docuseries on Jeffrey Epstein. It's called Filthy Rich, and this episode was called Follow the Money. So I got such a good response from the first video. You guys liked that I kind of followed the episode along chronologically, but also added in places where you might have been confused or you may have wanted to know more. So that's exactly what we're going to do for this episode. But before we get started, I'd like to have a word from our sponsor, and our sponsor today is Magellan TV. Staying along with the topic of what this video is about, I'd like to suggest a documentary that's on Magellan TV right now called Red Light, Green Light: The Fight Against Sex Trafficking. Human trafficking isn't something we like to think about, but it is very real. It's a reality that everyone in the world faces, and hopefully this film will help to better explain what it is, why it happens, and how we can stop it. Filmmakers Jared and Michelle Brock travel across 10 countries to explore the issue, attempting to answer the question, how can we prevent sexual exploitation before it happens in the first place? The film delves into the complications law enforcement and anti-trafficking organizations face in addressing exploitation, as well as the social factors that make certain women more vulnerable to victimization.
Trafficking should be banned, we all agree. But there is also sex work as labor. Our mayor, he says about 80 to 90% are victims of trafficking. We don't know because there's no real counting. Some work behind windows and you can count them, but there are a lot of people working right now in the private house or in the bedroom or in a hotel, whatever. We don't know.
It's just under an hour. It's extremely informative and extremely relevant right now. It was a very, very good film. And you can watch this documentary and thousands more right now on Magellan TV. Magellan TV was built by documentary filmmakers who share your passion for gripping true stories. They have over 2,000 documentaries on there right now, and they're adding more every single week. Magellan TV thinks that television should be both entertaining and smart, so they've scoured the globe for documentaries with the most dramatic imagery, most cutting-edge subjects, and the authentic insights from the world's top historians, scientists, and explorers. Magellan TV is available on Android or iOS. You can watch it on your tablet, your smartphone. You can stream it from your Roku or Apple TV. Many of these documentaries are available in 4K for no additional cost, and all of the documentaries can be streamed and viewed ad-free. Whether your interest is in history, science, true crime, nature, or all of the above, there is something for everyone on Magellan TV. They even have a whole kids section with documentaries that are geared specifically towards family-friendly watching. If you're interested in giving Magellan TV a try, please go to the link in the description box. Magellan TV is offering viewers of this channel 1 month free. There's no contracts. You're not tied into anything. You can cancel whenever you want. You can cancel at the end of that 1 month, but I don't think you're going to want to because there's so many good documentary series and movies on Magellan TV that it will take you much longer than a month to see everything that you want, and then they're going to add new stuff. You might never escape from Magellan TV's spell. Thank you so much to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. Thank you so much to you guys out there for watching the sponsors, being here with me during these videos. I really appreciate it, and let's get started on the video. I just want to let you guys know that I am putting together a video on the new updates from the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case that we've been covering since the beginning. It is an important video for me, and I want to put thought into it, and I want to put time into it, and I want to really examine how I feel about it before I sit down and talk to you guys about it. Because right now, if I sat down and talked to you guys about it, it would just be me yelling at the camera because I'm so livid about how this case went down and the conclusion of it. And I don't think this is the conclusion of it, but I just want to let you guys know that I'm working on something. I'll probably record it tomorrow. But it will go up after this. I also want to apologize because I do have a scratchy throat going on. It's been happening since I recorded the first video in this Epstein series. It started that day and it's just kind of gotten worse, so sometimes my voice will just completely give out. So there may be a couple more jump cuts in here than there usually are because my voice will just give out mid-sentence and I'll have to redo that sentence, but just bear with me. This episode was kind of all over the place. They jumped around a lot in times, like drastically. They went all the way back to the 70s and then they were back in 2006. And so it was kind of all over the place. So I tried to organize it into sections instead of just going over it chronologically the way it happened in the episode. So hopefully things make a little bit more sense for you, because once I did arrange it that way, it made a little bit more sense to me. But when we left off, they had just gotten a search warrant for Jeffrey Epstein's house, and they were going into the house, and they found some stuff in the house that we're going to talk about. But when they went in the house, they also noticed that a lot of things seemed to be missing. So there'd be like a desk there with computers and stuff on it, but then there would be cords hanging off as if something had previously been plugged in and then gotten removed. It looked like he'd been tipped off, that they were investigating him, and he did some damage control in anticipation of them obtaining a warrant to search his house. And it kind of made me giggle. It was kind of ridiculous because the police officer in this episode, Tim Malloy, said, quote, "It was fairly clear to me that Mr. Epstein knew he was under investigation." You think? Before you went into that house, you'd been talking to his employees, many of whom didn't even want to talk to you because they were afraid of him. Is it so crazy to believe that these people, one or more of these people, would have gone right to Epstein after talking to you and let him know that you were looking into him as a way to show loyalty and benefit somehow from their boss knowing they weren't snitches, for giving him information that would help him get away with a crime? So this was in 2005 when they finally got the warrant and they got into his house. And the thing that is creepiest of all, in my opinion, is all the weird art and pictures everywhere. Pictures of half-naked young kids, nude sculptures and art, nude photographs of real people. He loved his naked people art. There's also memo pads collected, like the kind of notebook you'd keep by the phone and write phone messages on. They found written down on these memo pads the names and the numbers of the adult females who had helped recruit the victims, as well as the victims' names and numbers. We're going to talk about these adult females later on. There was a phone message on one of these pads from a girl who had been a minor at the time, because her name's redacted, so we know she was a minor. But the message says she called in wondering if 2:30 was okay because she needed to stay at school. The most important piece of information garnered from that search, however, was basically confirming the layout of the house and the rooms. The victims had told the police how they were brought in, what door they were brought in, what the house looked like, the massage room, how you would have to go through the house to get to the massage room, what it looked like inside the massage room, etc. So being in the house allowed the police to verify that these victims had in fact also been inside the house, since they were familiar with the layout and had described what was inside of it. In this episode, we finally get an idea of how Jeffrey Epstein managed to worm his way into the world of wealth and privilege. He came from a very average background. He grew up in a working-class Coney Island family. He was a good student with good grades and exceptional potential. He even skipped a couple of grades in high school because he was so smart. But then he went to Cooper Union College, where he majored in physics for 2 years before dropping out. It's a big question to me why he was so brilliant and full of so much potential in high school, but he wasn't able to hack it in college. What happened in college that caused him to stop caring about academics when he clearly cared so much about academics in high school? So that was a lingering question that I couldn't find the answer to. However, even without a college degree or any teaching experience, he was able to land himself an excellent teaching job, teaching math and physics when he was 21 at the Dalton School. So the Dalton School is a co-ed Upper East Side private school. Every time I think about the Dalton School or schools like this, I just think about Gossip Girl and like the private schools that they went to, you know, the upper elite in Manhattan. And that's pretty much spot on. The About section on their website claims that Dalton has actively embraced an innovative and progressive approach to education for approximately 100 years. Their mission statement is to tailor each student's programs to their specific needs and learning styles. They are an intentionally diverse community committed to a tradition of lifelong learning and educational innovation. It sounds great to me. Their mission statements, the way they want to educate children, or how they allegedly say they want want to educate children, it sounds like the perfect way to teach a child something that will kind of like stick with them forever. Just rote memorization and Common Core and all of that garbage, it's not effective for lifelong learning. So if you teach to a child's specific needs and desires and interests, yes, they will do better. And I truly think they'll end up being more successful in life. So the Dalton School sounds like the perfect kind of school to bring out the best in each and every K through 12 child. Forbes ranked the Dalton School as number 13 on a list of best private schools in the country. And some of the school's alumni include Anderson Cooper, Claire Danes, and Chevy Chase. I know we're all wondering, how did Jeffrey Epstein get a job at such a prestigious school, or any school for that matter, with no credentials and no college degree? Well, I'm not exactly sure. I cannot give you the answer, but I can tell you the headmaster at the time of Epstein being hired was Donald Barr, the father of future Attorney General William Barr. Jeffrey Epstein started as a teacher at the school in September of 1974, and the previous February, Barr had announced his resignation as headmaster of Dalton School, citing his reasons as a meddling board of directors. However, he did agree to stay on as the school's headmaster until the end of the year, which would have been June. So when Jeffrey Epstein was hired, we can only assume, because we have brains in our heads, that it was Donald Barr who hired him, even though the school claims it's unclear whether Barr hired Epstein or not. To that, I would ask the Dalton School, who else is hiring teachers at your school besides the headmaster, whose job it is to hire teachers? But that's just my opinion. Don't come for me, Barr family. And it all starts to make more sense. It all starts to look a little more possible when we find out that Donald Barr made it a point to hire teachers from unconventional backgrounds. A social studies teacher who worked at Dalton from the 60s to the 80s claimed that Barr didn't care about your credentials as long as you were interesting and knew your stuff. And Jeffrey Epstein was interesting, wasn't he? To say the very, very, very least. He was young when he started teaching at Dalton. I believe he was about 21. And the students who remember him from Dalton said he was different than all the other teachers. At this time when he started, there was this strict dress code. And Jeffrey Epstein would come to work at the school with this long fur coat on, his shirt open at the neck, exposing his chest hair, gold chains. I call it the Scarface look, but that was Jeffrey Epstein's style in the 70s, apparently, as a teacher of a private Manhattan school. 8 former students claimed his conduct with teenage girls left an impression on them that lingered for decades. He would pay these girls a lot of attention in the hallway, openly flirting with them, and once he even showed up to a student party where it was just him and a bunch of underage kids drinking, and him, a teacher, the only teacher there, an adult. No one saw this coming? No one saw this coming with Epstein? An adult-ass teacher hanging out at a kids' party with underage kids while they're drinking? No one saw the red flags? Not all of the students thought he was creepy, though. One former student, Leslie Kidzeiger, claims she became close to Epstein when her parents were going through a divorce, and he never was anything but kind and attentive to her. He gave her a friendly, listening ear when she had no one else to talk to, and she claims he was always professional with her. To that, I would say I am very grateful that Leslie was not attacked or abused in any way by her teacher, Jeffrey Epstein. However, the fact that she says she was having a hard time, her parents were going through a divorce, she was in a vulnerable place, nobody else would listen to her, and he listened and he let her talk and he provided comfort to her. We know, okay, this is not up for debate. Jeffrey Epstein is a narcissist who cares about nobody but himself. So are we supposed to believe that Jeffrey Epstein, out of the goodness of his little black heart, just wanted to sit there and let this student cry on his shoulder? No, what he saw was a student who was going through a tough time, was vulnerable, and was ripe for the picking. That's what Jeffrey Epstein saw. And like I said, I'm glad nothing happened and he didn't pursue it. But I do think that Jeffrey Epstein being at this Manhattan private school and kind of trying to get himself in with the girls at this school taught him a lesson. And I'll elaborate on this when we talk about why he was dismissed from the Dalton school. Another student at Dalton, though, said Epstein did make attempts to spend time with her outside of the school, and she brought this to the headmaster, the new headmaster after Barr, a man named Gardner Dunnan, but nothing was done. An attorney for Dunnan claims that he had not been aware of Epstein's conduct while he was teaching at the Dalton school. But let's talk about Gardner Dunnan, because nobody is safe. Nobody's safe right now from my fury. Let's just talk about Gardner, talk about some things that happened in his life, and then we'll just kind of figure out if we believe him that he didn't know about Epstein's conduct before we move on. In 1986, a 14-year-old student at Dalton had allegedly been asked by Gardner Dunnan to live with him at his house and help care for his new baby. This girl, who has only been identified as JS in the complaints, she claimed that she was allowed to attend the Dalton school tuition-free in exchange for her acting as a family helper. And that is when Dunnan began sexually abusing her at his Manhattan townhouse and his New Jersey summer home. This went on for months, and it even happened when Dunnan's own wife was home, his then wife. She's since divorced him. It's all starting to make sense now, right? Dunnan, of course, claimed all of this and the lawsuit was dropped, but a lawyer representing the girl says they are planning to refile it. Okay, let's jump back to the Barr family, specifically William Barr, son of Donald Barr, previous headmaster of Dalton while Jeffrey Epstein worked there. William Barr is the same guy who recused himself from the Epstein case in Florida, claiming that his former law firm was involved somehow and there was this horrible conflict of interest. He did not, however, recuse himself from the case in New York, which makes less than no sense because the case against Jeffrey Epstein was the same case in Florida and New York, just different jurisdictions, It's all about the same stuff. So why are you going to recuse yourself from the Florida case, but not the New York case? And was it just some random law firm complication that compelled him to recuse himself from the Florida case? Or was it further conflicts, such as his father hiring the college dropout as a teacher, or that the U.S. attorney in Miami, who was supposed to be prosecuting Epstein's case, was Alexander Acosta, a man who had served on President Donald Trump's cabinet with Barr? I think that last one right there is the ticket. William Barr is also the man who, after Epstein took his own life while on suicide watch and round-the-clock guards, said that, yeah, this all might look suspicious, but it isn't. He was like, even though I, too, thought it was suspicious at first, and I'm this, prolific, wealthy, and talented lawyer, I was suspicious at first, just like the rest of you, but now I know. This was just a perfect storm of screw-ups, which gave Jeffrey Epstein the opportunity to end it all. Barr claims that he has personally viewed the footage from the night of Epstein's death and confirmed that no one entered the area where Epstein was housed that night. I'm glad that William Barr was able to view that footage since none of us have ever seen it. In fact, I thought that they said the cameras weren't working that night. So once again, here's these contradicting statements. You read one article and it says the cameras weren't working. But then this other article pops up where William Barr wants us to believe that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't murdered. So he's telling us that he saw the footage and he can say unequivocally that nobody was in or outside the cell at the time of Jeffrey Epstein's death. So now we can all believe him and go on with our lives and stop, making Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself memes. So I am invoking the collective true crime community brain right now, and I'm asking you guys, have you ever heard that William Barr viewed this footage? Because as far as I knew, there was no footage. The cameras weren't working. So maybe I mistook something or misunderstood, and if I did, please clear it up for me in the comments, respectfully, if it's possible. And Epstein made an attempt on his life the month before, in July. At least that's what we've been told. The video of this happening was sent to federal investigators, but when they viewed it, they discovered that it wasn't the right tape at all. Apparently, this video no longer exists. The jail inadvertently preserved video from the wrong tier, and as a result, the video from outside of Epstein's cell when he attempted to take his own life the previous July is just gone. It's so convenient. So before we move on, I just want to give you a quick glimpse into my chaotic brain when it comes to cases like this, where things are clearly being hidden from us. Things are clearly being kept from public view. Whether you're a conspiracy theorist or you think conspiracies are stupid, I think all of us can agree something doesn't add up here. Something's not right, and we don't know everything. In my opinion, I don't even think Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Because if you think about it, this is a man who we have been told over and over again was brilliant, manipulative, controlling. He was calculated. He always had a plan. And he knew that he was messing with very rich and very powerful people. He was blackmailing these people. He would basically collect intel on them and hang this stuff over their heads so he could get what he wanted in the form of money, houses, jets, prestige, political pull and influence, connections to Hollywood, connections to the world's elite, and all over the world, not just in America, Prince Andrew. So when we say, how did he make all his money? We don't understand. You know that we do understand. We understand that he was blackmailing probably hundreds of people. The very same people you would see cozying up to him in the pictures that lined his house. You know, rich people, actors, politicians, powerful people. And he was blackmailing them, and that's how he got his money, in my opinion, allegedly. Okay, so that's where he made his money from. So he knew he was messing with some pretty powerful people. He knew that they probably weren't the biggest fans of him, even though they had to pretend to like him. And he also knew that he would be at times walking on thin ice. So somebody like Jeffrey Epstein's going to have a dead man switch. And for those of you who don't know what a dead man switch is, it's basically like, imagine somebody's, threatening to blow something up. And the police show up and they have, a switch in their hand. And they say, hey, if you shoot me to stop me from doing this, I'm going to let go of the switch, and then we're all going to die. We're all going to be caught up in this huge blast that occurs after I let go of the switch. So it's something literal, but also metaphorical. Jeffrey Epstein's dead man switch would have been a USB drive with all the information that he had collected on these people. And he most likely would have given it to a lawyer and said, hey, if anything happens to me, if I die, if I disappear, no matter what happens or how it looks, you release this, because if I go down, everyone goes down. That's who Jeffrey Epstein was. So I have a hard time believing that he, took his own life. I'll never believe that he took his own life, ever. He was way too much of a narcissist, and he got away with way too much in the past. Why would he not think that he could continue getting away with things? And two, that somebody would take him out not knowing what he did have hidden or what he had ready to go out in the event of his death. So I think that they took him in, they arrested him to make it look good, to make it look like they were doing something because everybody was outraged that they didn't do something in 2007. They took him in, put him in jail, and then, what happened? The guards fell asleep, the cameras weren't working, and Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Oh no. Well, I guess we can kind of go on with our lives now and stop talking about this, stop digging in and seeing who else is involved. All right, population of the world, go back to watching Netflix and living your happily ignorant lives. That's what I think. I think whoever's orchestrating this probably ghosted him away. Maybe he got some plastic surgery so he doesn't look exactly like himself. They ghosted him away to some island. He's sitting there happy as a clam, probably getting, booze and underage girls shipped into him on the daily. And that's what I think. And if you guys disagree, that's cool. Let me know why you disagree and let me know why it's more logical than what I just said. I mean, it's just looking at patterns and MOs. Jeffrey Epstein literally got away with everything and had been for years, as we can see. What would make him think that anything would be different now? So James Patterson referred to Epstein's time at Dalton as basically jump-starting his lifelong pattern of getting away with things that other people can't. And it's true. How did he manage to situate himself in a job teaching when he couldn't even graduate from college. I don't care how progressive a school you are. In New York State, a teaching license is required and necessary to teach at a private or public school. And an unlicensed teacher can only be hired if an application is filed and approved before that teacher starts. Was this done? I don't know, but I highly doubt it. There's a reason why we don't just hire anyone off the street to teach our children, because you need more than a basic knowledge of any subject to teach. You need to be trained on how to deal with children of all different ages, how to handle children with special needs, how to deliver the material in the best and most effective way. Just being interested and knowing your stuff does not a teacher make, yet this happened. This really happened. And how would all of those parents paying thousands of dollars a year for their children to attend this fancy Manhattan prep school feel if they knew this guy was literally just hired, sight unseen, with no credentials and no licenses or certifications? So eventually, Jeffrey Epstein was let go due to his poor performance, or at least that's why they said he was let go. I think that they found out what he was doing. I think that they had gotten a lot of complaints from girls in the school. They figured out what was happening, and they kicked him to the curb. And I think that this taught Epstein that he couldn't prey on the daughters of Manhattan's elite. He had to find underage girls that were in dire circumstances, that needed the money, that needed a friend, that needed a steadying force in their life. And just like he did with Leslie, the one girl who said he was completely professional and he was just this ear to listen and the shoulder to cry on, I think that was him priming her to eventually go on and, try to abuse her. I don't think he was just being a good teacher. I don't think he was just being a good person. I think he was looking at a girl crying, upset, devastated, her world falling down around her, and he saw something he could take advantage of. Don't worry about good old Jeff. He's always going to land on his feet, right? In 1976, Ace Greenberg, the former CEO of Bear Stearns, a New York City brokerage firm, hired Epstein. Well, he didn't hire Epstein. He pretty much made his partner hire Epstein, but whatever. The story of how he came to know Epstein varies depending on which source you're reading or what newspaper you're reading. Some sources say that Ace's daughter, Lynn, was a student at Dalton, and she told her father what a wonderful financier that Jeff Epstein would make, her teacher. However, in the Netflix series, Michael Tenenbaum, who was a partner at Bear Stearns, claims Ace Greenberg called him and said a trustee from the Dalton School had given him the name of a young professor who was interested in working on Wall Street, and he asked Michael to interview him. Now, we're going to see a lot of these examples where someone calls someone and says they've got a guy for the job and asks if this guy can be given an interview, and this guy's always Epstein. And the people calling are always rich and powerful. If we're being honest with ourselves, they can call it an interview. They can call it an interview all they want. But when someone who is in your circle, whether personally or professionally, calls you and suggests you interview someone for a job, they obviously want you to give this person the job. Jeffrey Epstein is the epitome of the saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. In this series, Tenenbaum says that he believed Epstein was dating Greenberg's daughter, Lynn, a student at Dalton. And it's also reported that he was tutoring Greenberg's son. So Epstein had clearly already wormed his way into, Ace Greenberg's life and family. He'd attached himself like a leech. But I mean, what do we know about Ace Greenberg? Who else does he have ties to? He's most well known for investing Donald Trump's money for years, President Donald Trump. And in 1998, he donated $1 million to help poor elderly men who couldn't afford Viagra, saying, "It's something that will give a lot of pleasure to people." Is that relevant? Maybe. Maybe not, but I thought I would mention it, right? He gave a lot of money to other charities and things too. This one just stood out to me. I mean, someone has to worry about impotence, I guess. So anyways, back to Bear Stearns. Tenenbaum hired Epstein in 1976 to develop their quantitative analyses for options, whatever that means. And he found that Epstein was terrific at it. Who else uses the word terrific a lot? Epstein was quick-witted and he dealt with unpredictable occurrences effectively, and Michael Tenenbaum was really impressed with his new employee until 2 months later when he found out that Epstein had lied on his resume. The colleges he had listed had never heard of him, so Tenenbaum called Ace Greenberg and he's like, how do I proceed? I know you got some personal ties to this man, I know you're the one that wanted me to hire him, but what do I do? And allegedly, Ace Greenberg told him to handle Jeff Epstein the way he would anyone else. So Tenenbaum called Epstein into his office with the plan to fire him for lying. And he claims this is where Epstein's salesman skills came in handy, the big razzle-dazzle of Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein gave Tenenbaum this huge sob story, saying he'd lied about his college education and not having a college degree because he knew that he would never get a job teaching at a good school if he'd been honest. And the only reason he continued to lie when he came to Bear Stearns was because he didn't want the people at Dalton to find out that he had lied. Tenenbaum found him convincing and disarming, and he couldn't bear to see this young man's potential squandered over something little like being a compulsive liar. But I guess that would serve you well on Wall Street, wouldn't it? And not only did he not lose his job, Epstein became a limited partner in 1980. He didn't have a college degree. He lied about not having a college degree. He was going to get fired, and then he, razzle-dazzled Tenenbaum, and then he's made a partner in the firm. And this all sounds completely normal to everyone, right? This sounds like absolutely reasonable. A few years later, he was fired, and the details of why he was let go are still pretty cloudy. In the Vanity Fair article, the marvelous Mr. Epstein or the amazing Mr. Epstein, whatever. But that article where they should have been talking about how he was a sexual predator, but instead they were just asking him, how'd you become this wonder boy on Wall Street? And how'd you do this? And tell us your secrets, Mr. Epstein. But anyways, he claimed that he had been let go at Bear Stearns because of a result of 3 different things. He'd lent money to a friend to buy stocks. There were discrepancies in his expense account, and there was rumors of an affair with a secretary. Only Jeff Epstein would make him getting fired from a Wall Street firm sound glamorous, or underplayed and glamorous at the same time. Yeah, I lent some money to a friend to buy stocks, but I didn't give them any insider trading information. No, I just lent money to them and then told them to buy whatever stock they wanted with it. And then, the expense report, just some discrepancies, missed a zero here, added a zero there. And then, of course, the rumors of an affair with a secretary because Jeff Epstein wanted to be the original Don Draper. And it's not really scandalous, right, anymore when a man has an affair with his secretary. He wasn't married. I don't know if this alleged fake secretary was married, but it kind of adds to the mystique when he's talking to Vanity Fair, I'm just a ladies' man. They just can't keep their hands off of me. Even at Bear Stearns, the secretaries just wanted to get in my pants so bad. Make me a martini, lady. But if we dig a little deeper, the expense account story seems to be the most credible. And it looks like it was more than a simple discrepancy. He was outright lying about expenses and stealing money from the company, but he was just let go. No charges were ever pressed, and this is a pattern as well. Now let's talk about Steven Hoffenberg, CEO of Towers Financial Group. He says he met Epstein in 1986 after Epstein was fired from Bear Stearns. I get the feeling that Hoffenberg was sort of a mentor to Epstein, kind of someone he would model himself after. When they met, Hoffenberg was the self-made mogul guy flying around on private planes with unlimited income. And Hoffenberg says in the Netflix special, without me, he wouldn't be the billionaire he is today. And those poor girls wouldn't be raped. I'm here for redemption and to tell the story to the public. According to Hoffenberg, the CEO of a very large European company reached out to him and said they had this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, right? Who'd been employed there. He was brilliant and effective, but his moral compass was just a little bit upside down. They asked Hoffenberg if he would consider giving Epstein an interview, and of course we already talked about what the interview request actually means. It means you owe me a favor, and here's how you can repay me, or if you do this for me, then I'll owe you one. Well, I bet you're thinking, why would they expect Hoffenberg to hire this guy when they just told him that Epstein's moral compass was upside down? In fact, A guy with a broken moral compass was perfect for Hoffenberg because he was running a Ponzi scheme at that time. So the more upside down your moral compass, the better. Like, let's just throw it in the lake, honestly. Throw it in the lake, set it on fire. No moral compass was perfect for Hoffenberg. Something that stood out to me too while watching this is how people talk about Epstein. The victims, the people who knew him, people who worked with him, they all kind of talk about him in the same way. He was manipulative. He was calculated. He could get you to do anything. But his victims talk about this with fear and sadness. And the men who worked with Epstein talk about it almost like they're in awe of him. Steven Hoffenberg said, quote, "He's got a gift that's extraordinary where he controls people he meets and manipulates them totally with charisma." So you see what I mean. The words being used here, extraordinary, gift, charisma, these are all positive words when talking about someone who literally screwed with people's minds and lives to get what he wanted from them and left them broken without an iota of guilt or any human emotion. It's like these men, these business associates of Epstein, are almost like resentful in a way. He manipulated me, he confused me, he gaslighted me, he lied to me, I believed him, but at the same time, they're also like, I wish I could do that. So this Ponzi scheme, it seems like Epstein was one of the main masterminds behind creating a plan that would make it so successful. They would use false financial statements to exaggerate the value of the company to lure in new investors. This was a scheme that benefited those who were in the company to the tune of $460 million. And Steven Hoffenberg did do 20 years in federal prison. But Epstein never saw any punishment from his part in it, even though he ran fake securities and fake assets, he manipulated the stock prices and sold stock illegally. Why? Why didn't Hoffenberg bring Epstein in on the case with him? Why didn't he give Epstein's name to the prosecutors to give himself some leverage? I mean, this is not like a decent guy who lives by some sort of code, right? This is a millionaire CEO who didn't have enough money and wanted to cheat people out of more money so he could have enough money, which he never would because enough is never going to be enough for people like this, right? So it's not like he's like, oh, I'm going to take accountability. It was my idea. So Jeffrey Epstein, and he can just go on with his life. I don't want to interrupt his potential. No, that's not why he didn't bring Epstein in, out of the goodness of his heart, out of concern, or out of some misguided Wall Street traders' moral code. Well, Hoffenberg tells us in the documentary, he wants us to know, he took the whole responsibility for everything. That's mighty big of you, Steve. And he didn't give evidence against Epstein because Epstein told him that he'd been cooperating with the Department of Justice as a witness for years, and he had pull with them. Hoffenberg doesn't think that even if he had testified against Epstein, anything would have happened to Epstein. He was just too connected and too protected. And he obviously wouldn't want Epstein's people to start pulling stuff out of his past. I mean, he's already serving 20 years in federal prison. It's likely that this Ponzi scheme wasn't the first illegal thing that he did, as he was already, pretty rich before he did that. And maybe when his protege, Jeffrey Epstein, came in and was so brilliant and so good at all of this, maybe Hoffenberg shared some of these past illegal activities he had done. And maybe Epstein had kept a record of these illegal financial activities that he had done. So what I'm thinking is Epstein had some stuff on Hoffenberg that would have put him back into federal prison or lengthened his sentence. So Hoffenberg wasn't trying to, push it with Epstein. And now that Epstein's dead, allegedly, Hoffenberg's like, yeah, I'll get on Netflix and talk about this all you want. I know I didn't say anything to anyone before, but now I'm completely willing to talk about a dead man who can't counteract my argument or expose me for other things I've done in my past. Hoffenberg said, quote, "You can't grasp the magnitude of this man's controlling effect. Jeffrey Epstein was able to control and manipulate people in an extreme method. And his pattern, which we have come to find, is blackmail. I think everything he got, every opportunity that was handed to him was because he was really good at digging into people's lives or getting them to confess things to him, finding things that were in the dark that all of these people would want kept hidden and using it in order to get what he wanted. And this started, in my opinion, with Les Wexner. What did Epstein have on Les Wexner to get him to hand over a massive multi-million-dollar house, to hand over power of attorney for all of his billions of dollars when Les was not the type of guy who would give up control of anything, much less his fortune, his livelihood, everything. While Epstein was working for Stephen Hoffenberg, he would fly to Ohio to see Les often on a plane that Les arranged for him. Epstein also told Hoffenberg that he had a plan to manipulate and control Wexner's money for his own financial benefit. In 1991, Epstein oversaw the sale of more than $1.3 million of stock from Wexner's company. What did Epstein have on Les Wexner? It may be a little bit more complicated than we thought, or it may be a lot simpler than we thought. You know, a tale as old as time. Love, trust, sex. Let's examine this a bit. During Epstein's deposition by victim attorney Brad Edwards, he was asked if he was bisexual. Epstein, not Brad Edwards. Epstein was asked if he was bisexual, and Epstein said no. He was then asked if he had had a sexual relationship with Les Wexner. He said no. He was then asked if he'd ever been sexually abused as a child. He said no. But there are rumors, and there have been rumors circulating around the area of Columbus, Ohio, at the time that Wexner and Epstein were spending a lot of time together. And these rumors basically say that Epstein was Wexner's boyfriend. According to the podcast The Hidden Truth Show, which had Robert Fitrakis on, who was a lawyer and a reporter in Columbus, Ohio, both the state inspector general and the former Franklin County sheriff told him, Fitrakis, that there was a sexual relationship there between Epstein and Les Wexner.
And in one of your articles I read, you point out that the Ohio Inspector General called Epstein Wexner's boyfriend.
Correct.
Why don't we start with that? What do you think it means by boyfriend?
Well, I think they were looking very carefully at Epstein's influence over Mr. Wexner, who had been a very low-key guy, kind of shy and retiring. And suddenly, in the late 80s, Jeff Epstein shows up in town, and suddenly, they're everywhere together. And there's all sorts of rumors about Epstein. There's a certain amount of local criminal activity. But we were hearing reports at the time, nothing about underage children, but my newspaper, I was writing for the Columbus Free Press and later the Columbus Guardian and Columbus Alive. But we were hearing tales of, sex party with models. And there was some concern by the Inspector General by the late 1990s that Epstein may be running a honey trap that is compromising very powerful people to become rich himself.
Compromising them in Ohio in particular?
Ohio, New York at the time.
And if you look at the evolution of their relationship, it does seem possible. Allegedly, Robert Meester, an insurance agent, introduced Wexner and Epstein in the mid to late 80s. They began spending a lot of time together, and former colleagues of Wexner's said they noticed a change in Wexner when Epstein came into the picture. He began withholding his trust from them and putting it all in Jeffrey Epstein, his new friend. Epstein also managed the construction and design of Wexner's 316-foot yacht. You may think that this isn't a big deal. It doesn't seem suspicious, but remember, Epstein was allegedly Wexner's financial advisor. And I don't know why you would have your financial advisor design your yacht and oversee the construction of it. Maybe tell you if you have enough money to build a yacht, but not be there physically hands-on, making sure it's built exactly to your specifications. There's other people for that. That seems like something a significant other would do. Someone who is personally invested in that yacht because they might be spending a lot of time with you on it. In 1991, Wexner gave Epstein total power of attorney over everything. And in 1992, Wexner got involved in a real estate development in New Albany, Ohio, which coincided with Epstein buying a $3.5 million mansion in New Albany.
In order to create New Albany, the kind of Stepford perfect village for the rich, Mr. Wexner had to secure $100 million in infrastructure from the city of Columbus. So essentially, water and sewage hadn't been extended to a non-existent entity with a contract since the 1950s. But Mr. Wexner got the Columbus City Council, with a quarter of the people in the city being relatively poor and living in poverty, to build him $100 million in infrastructure, water and sewage, so he could create this model community. In the process, a variety of things were happening. The city council president, Jerry Hammond, was accused of being bribed. 22 investors put up $10,000 each for Mr. Hammond to create a brand new jazz club called the Major Chord in the Short North. So that was part of that process, that he was looking at public corruption. And while he was looking at public corruption, Epstein's name came about. Also, Mr. Wexner's accountant, Arthur Shapiro, was shot to death mob style in 1985. And it was also reported that Wexner took a big hit in the 87 stock market dive. And then suddenly the Wonder Boy, Jeff Epstein, shows up out of nowhere. They used to also call him at the Inspector General's office Les's Gal Friday, because he seemed to be part ballet, part butler, part intelligence asset.
2004, the Wexner Foundation donated $10 million to Epstein's foundation, and as we know, he gave Epstein houses, planes, etc. It is suspected that Les Wexner was bisexual and had a relationship with Epstein, which eventually Epstein threatened to expose, along with most likely a number of other things Les Wexner told him when they were behind closed doors. And I don't care what anyone's sexual orientation is, but it would make more sense knowing that the two were romantically involved to answer the question of why a businessman who was, advanced in his years, had seen a lot of things, had a lot of wisdom, had been successful, why this man who had been so successful before was making so many stupid decisions now around one person, Jeffrey Epstein.
First of all, going back to the original question, sexual orientation of Wexner, what do we think it is?
Well, at the time, he was thought to be gay. I talked to a woman who used to be his public escort, and she tried to convince me after, she had a few drinks, that he was bisexual. We really didn't write about that at the time. We figured it wasn't our business. But, he was thought to have eclectic sexual proclivities. Jeff Epstein was thought to have moved the models into his circle prior to his marriage to Abigail. So,
moving female models into his circle.
Male and female.
Oh, male and female. And so, what do you think? Do you think that he had a sexual relationship with Epstein?
Personally, I think he did, but we didn't think, that wasn't what we were pursuing. Only to the extent, and the reason I thought they did is because the state inspector general and the former Franklin County Sheriff Earl Smith at the time both felt that Epstein had a hold on Wexner and it was involving sex.
And there was something strange that Epstein told a New York Times reporter in 2018 before he died. He said that criminalizing sex with underage girls was a cultural aberration, and that at times in history, it was perfectly acceptable. He pointed out also that homosexuality had long been considered a crime and was still punishable by death in some places in the world. The reporter who talked to him, James Stewart, said he acted like what he had done was completely normal for rich guys like him, saying, quote, "The overriding impression I got from our roughly 90-minute conversation was that Mr. Epstein knew an astonishing number of rich, famous, and powerful people and had photos to prove it. He also claimed to know a great deal about these people, some of it potentially damaging or embarrassing, including details about their supposed sexual proclivities and recreational drug use." Why would Epstein be so open talking to a reporter about his gross viewpoints on sexual assault of a minor? Well, like I said, this was a year before he died. He was unapologetic about his behavior until the very end. And he wasn't named in the story because allegedly he was just a source and he requested to be an anonymous one. But after he died, the New York Times decided, well, we don't owe him anything. He's dead. The agreement with him is no longer viable, and they printed what he had told this reporter. Now, in 2019, Les Wexner said he had cut ties with Epstein in 2007 when he found out that Epstein had stolen more than $46 million from him.
Everyone has to feel enormous regret for the advantage that was taken of so many young women. And that's just unexplainable, abhorrent behavior, and clearly is something we all would condemn.
But once again, Les Wexner was unable to explain why he had never pressed charges, just, broke ties. So my friend comes to my house and steals $46 million from me. And then all I have to say to this person is like, get out of here. You're done with me. We're not in each other's lives anymore. Keep the $46 million. Yeah, whatever. That's cool. But like, get out. I'm so mad. And that's the punishment. That's the repercussion for $46 million. Either Les Wexner is way more rich than any of us knew, to the point where $46 million is a drop in the bucket, or he didn't want to bring law enforcement in. He didn't want to have this guy arrested or have charges pressed against him because he knew that Jeffrey Epstein had his thumb firmly on that dead man switch. Let's fast forward again to Palm Beach in 2006, where there is an investigation going on into allegations of Jeffrey Epstein luring underage girls to his house for massages and then sexually assaulting them. Mike Feiston, a private investigator who had once worked for the Miami-Dade Police Department, was hired by Brad Edwards, who was representing some of the victims, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein. He was told that the FBI was looking into Epstein, but they didn't have much, and it was a slow-moving investigation. So Mike basically, Aaron Brockovich did. He went down into West Palm Beach. He went into some of the more disadvantaged communities and just started talking to people so he could track down more victims, and he did. He gave this long list of names and addresses to the FBI to help them out. He said he found something like 45 additional victims. All of this information he gave to the FBI. Once Epstein figured out they were digging deeper, he hired private investigators of his own to start watching Brad Edwards, the lawyer of the victims, with the intent to dig up something on him that they could use to blackmail Brad Edwards and force him to back off. When they didn't find anything in his background, they turned to scare tactics, intimidation tactics, as is always the case with Jeffrey Epstein. If he couldn't get dirt on you, he would just threaten to crush you using the resources of the rich and powerful friends who he did have dirt on. So these private investigators, they start sitting outside Brad Edwards' house, watching him and his family, following his wife. They did the same thing to some of Epstein's victims. Shauna Rivera remembered that people were always watching her, and there was always a car parked at the end of her street. One night, a car pulled right up to her window and it shined its headlights into her room while she was trying to sleep. So she called her lawyer, Brad Edwards, who sent over private investigator Mike Feiston to step in. What followed was what Shauna called a private investigator war. They were taking pictures of each other and videotaping each other. And finally, Mike told her to get in the car, and he drove her hours away to a hotel where she could stay so that they wouldn't find her, she could get some rest, and they would hopefully stop harassing her family. So in November of 2007, the FBI was putting together a case that would have put anyone behind bars for the rest of their lives. Anyone but one person, apparently. FBI Special Agent Kiora Kendall was hot on the case, and she was sure that with what they had, Epstein would be a non-issue once they got him in court. He just needed to be convicted of one count, and it would be all. That would be it. He would no longer be a threat to the women of Palm Beach and New York and Paris and the Virgin Islands. They had 35 to 40 victims ready to testify. They had proof that some of these victims had been transferred over state lines for the purposes of sex, which is a federal crime. They had the names of accomplices. They had everything they would need if they were prosecuting a case against any man in America, any man who didn't have an army of millions behind him and apparently so much dirt on so many people that he'd be able to wiggle his way out of anything. So Mike Ritter, the Palm Beach sheriff, he goes and he meets with Alexander Acosta, who was the federal prosecutor in Miami at the time. Before that, he served in 4 presidentially appointed U.S. Senate-confirmed positions during the administration of George W. Bush. On August 22, 2003, he became the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, where, ironically enough, he increased federal prosecutions against human trafficking. What is even more ironic is when he was appointed to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida, he was praised for cracking down on white-collar crime. And then, 10 years after, Acosta handed Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal on a diamond-encrusted golden platter, but he's cracking down on that white-collar crime. President Donald Trump nominated Acosta for the position of Secretary of Labor, and he hung out in that position for a while, but in 2019, he did something kind of strange. He proposed cutting the funding of his department's International Labor Affairs Bureau, which happens to be an agency that combats human trafficking internationally. So that department used to get $68 million of funding a year, but he cut it to under $20 million. I guess that 2019 was just not a good year to care about human trafficking for Acosta, or 2007 if we're being honest. He resigned from this office in July of 2019 once he was sick of being openly and venomously criticized for his role in letting a dangerous sexual predator off with a slap on the wrist. I'm talking about Epstein. So Mike Ritter wanted to hear from Acosta personally that this case was going to be prosecuted. The Palm Beach Police Department was no longer active on the investigation after the FBI took over, but they were still being kept in the loop by the FBI. So Mike knew exactly how strong the case was against Epstein. And according to Mike, when he left that day after having a conversation, Acosta gave him every assurance that they would go after Epstein with everything they had. That is, of course, until Alexander Acosta met with Epstein's lawyers, and then everybody stopped talking. The FBI didn't talk to the Palm Beach Police Department anymore, and we'll talk about that next video. But before we end this video, I want to discuss the 3 women who worked for Epstein that were considered to be on the same level as Ghislaine Maxwell in his hierarchy, towards the top of the pyramid. At this point, I've only watched the first 2 episodes. I'm kind of going through them as we go and kind of watching with you. So I don't know if they go into more detail about these 2 women in the last 2 episodes, but just in case they don't, let's talk about them. And you saw their names at one point in the Netflix documentary when they were talking about the 4 female accomplices of Jeffrey Epstein. The first being Ghislaine, obviously. And then you have 39-year-old Sarah Kellen, who has since started going by the name Sarah Kensington. She was reported to have been a high-ranking Epstein employee and kept her greedy little fingers clutched around a list of girls who she would call and set up times for them to come to Epstein's house and be abused by him.
Epstein's chief lieutenants, says Ransom, were Ghislaine Maxwell and Sarah Kellen.
When Jeffrey wanted me, Sarah Kellen or Ghislaine would call me to his bedroom, and I had no choice but to go. Ghislaine was always on the phone, and Sarah Kellen was always on her laptop organizing things.
Did Sarah Kellen essentially make appointments for you? What did she do?
Absolutely. She booked all my flights.
When you read that Ghislaine Maxwell says she had no involvement in this, or when Sarah Kellen says she was a victim, what's your reaction to that?
I think it's disgraceful, and these people are going to burn in hell. Ghislaine knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that every time she called me, I was going to be raped. Every time. Sarah Kellen knew for every girl that she organized to go on that island or to be picked up by a car, to go to the New York mansion, she knew that these girls were there to be raped repeatedly. She's going to rot in hell. Definitely.
She's often been referred to as Ghislaine Maxwell's assistant, second in command, or lieutenant. A victim of Epstein's claimed that Sarah and Ghislaine would both coach her on the best ways to please him. Ugh. Many of the girls also pointed to Sarah as the woman who would lead them to and from the massage room, show them where the oils and the lotions were, and one report stated that Kellen told the girls not to talk to the authorities. Now, Sarah owns an interior design firm called SLK Designs, evidently operating out of a midtown Manhattan building that Jeffrey Epstein's brother Mark had a majority share in, 66% to be exact. This condo, which is listed to take deliveries for SLK Designs, is also the address where Jeffrey Epstein would allegedly rent units to house models. According to an August 2019 article from The Cut, the Facebook page of SLK Designs states that Sarah is working with a number of clients on various projects, including renovating corporate apartments in the Caribbean, Paris, and New York. You guys are smart. I don't have to point out that Epstein had property in each and every one of these cities, but I will. Anyways, I just did. Sarah was on the flight plan for the Lolita Express many times, and many of these trips coincided with when former President Bill Clinton was also aboard the Lolita Express, at least 11 flights between 2002 and 2003. And you're like, 11 flights? That's not bad. That was 1 year. That's like one flight a month. Sarah and her husband, NASCAR driver Brian Vickers, own property in New York City, Miami Beach, and North Carolina. So after allegedly luring underage girls into the clutches of Jeffrey Epstein, Sarah is living the good life with her husband, jet-setting and picking out countertops for other rich people's kitchens. Isn't America grand? Next, we have Nadia Marcinkova, a 33-year-old woman who is reported to have been purchased by Jeffrey Epstein from her family in the former Yugoslavia when she was just 15. And after that, she lived with him as his sex slave until she aged out, of course. She has been accused of not only bringing girls in, but engaging in sexual acts with them while Epstein watched. She worked for years as an international fashion model, repping brands such as Chanel, Christian Dior, Valentino, Vogue, and MTV. But now she's a certified commercial pilot and flight instructor who goes under the social media handle of Global Girl and runs her own company called AviLoop, which offers discount flight lessons. This aviation company was also registered at the building Mark Epstein owned 66% of, the same building that Sarah's interior design company is based out of. Mark Epstein claims he's never heard of AviLoop, even though the company used his building for 7 years. Did I mention that she's a pilot? A pilot that holds 3 rating certificates for single-engine aircrafts, multi-engine aircrafts, and various Gulfstream business jets? What a handy thing to have a pilot as such a close friend when you have a lot of things you might want to fly in and out of the country. I wonder who paid for her training and stuff. I wonder. Nadia has also started going by a different name since her benefactor died, allegedly. It's not alleged that she's going by a different name, but I think it's alleged that he died. Then we have Adriana Ross, former model from Poland, who moved to Florida in 2002 and began living with Epstein. She was also on the Lolita Express flight plan with Bill Clinton several times. She was also questioned in regards to Prince Andrew's involvement with Epstein, to which she invoked her Fifth Amendment rights and refused to answer any questions. When the Daily Mail approached Adriana to ask her some questions, a man with her, who was believed to be her husband, growled at them, "It's not for you to make a judgment. You don't know anything about it." According to friends, she is now an accountant who works long hours and rarely socializes. In 2017, she and her husband, Ariel Salazar, bought a $350,000 home in Miami. Adriana was accused of enlisting underage girls for Epstein and had some inside information on his relationship with Prince Andrew, though it's unclear what exactly she knows because she's not talking. In November of 2019, FBI sources claimed that there was about to be some arrests in the Epstein case, and she fled the country days before the BBC documentary where Virginia Roberts spilled all the tea about Prince Andrew's devious and despicable behavior towards her when she was just 17. I guess it was a good time to hop on a plane if you were tight with Epstein. All 3 of these women, along with Ghislaine Maxwell, were listed as co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein during that 2007 case against him, yet when all was said and done, nothing ever happened to them. Why? Well, we're going to talk about that next time. The next video is going to go into detail about the deal that Epstein got in 2007, thanks to good old Alexander Acosta, and the speculations for why he was offered such an amazing deal when there was a mountain of evidence that showed who he really was. And I know from reading the comments from last video that you guys are pissed about the same stuff that I'm pissed about, that there were so many people enabling Jeffrey Epstein, including women. And I know women are not better than men. I'm not trying to say that men are great at enabling, pedophiles and women would never do that. But what I'm saying is it makes it so much worse when a woman does it, because it just feels like a betrayal of your sisters. It's more likely if you're a woman that you'll get raped, murdered, or be involved in domestic abuse. I myself have just acquired a taser because I am sick of going out on bike rides and things and having someone follow me and not feeling safe in my own community, in my own town, to ride my bike around without the fear that some sketchy guy is going to try to grab me and pull me in the bushes and do whatever he wants to me and then leave me either broken with that hanging over my head for the rest of my life or kill me first. And that is the constant fear for women to go out. And we want to protect ourselves. I'm even thinking of taking some self-defense classes. But the point is, a woman doing that to other women bothers me way more than men doing it. Because why? It's not logical. I don't understand. It should bother me just as much. But I would never do that to another woman. I would never set her up to be sexually harassed, sexually abused. And an underage girl, a child, for a grown woman to do that to a child, it only leads me to ask the question, what happened to these women in their childhoods? What happened to them in their pasts that led them to devalue the goodness and the happiness and the joy and the innocence of being a child and allowing other children to be children for as long as they can be? What happened to them? And I think it's pretty clear the kinds of things that happened to them, especially if the story of Jeffrey Epstein buying Nadia from her family when she was 15 is true.
I don't know where these people are. I don't know whether they're going to knock on my door, whether they're going to phone me, whether I'm going to get an email. It's affected me to such an extent that until they're arrested, I don't think I'll ever start to heal.
But for now, that's all I have for this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share if you think it's worth sharing. Follow me on social media, Twitter and Instagram. I know that you guys are always messaging me about case updates, and I'm usually on top of case updates on Twitter. So as soon as I hear something, I'll retweet it and then give my opinion on it. So it's a way for you to kind of get an idea into what I'm thinking and what cases I'm following and stuff before I actually make a video about it. Thank you so much to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check them out in the description box if you haven't already. If you have already, let me know what you're watching. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if you watched that Red Light, Green Light documentary. It was very excellent. I think it would be a helpful thing to watch after, watching this Jeffrey Epstein thing. And thank you so much to my Patreons who hold me down behind the scenes every single day. I will see everybody very soon. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe. And I love you. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say I Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly.